Welcome back to 5 Miles Easy with me, Rose Harvey.
And me, Steph McCall. She's an Olympian.
And she's an elite ultra runner, so you might think we have this running thing pretty figured out.
We absolutely don't, but we're on a mission to become better runners.
And we're bringing you along for the journey.
So let's lace up for 5 Miles Easy. Rose, so today we are joined by Adelle Tracey, who is a Hoka middle distance athlete competing for Jamaica, and she's just actually flown back from Jamaica where she won the 1500 metres national champion and set a season's best in the 800.
It was an incredible race, and I'm so excited to get into Adelle's career because she's been competing at an international level since she was 16. So she has so much experience and has just been in the sport for such a long time. A lot of highs and lows on her journey, which we will get into. And we talk a lot about what has kept her in the sport this long, what's helped her ride the lows and get to the next high, which I think is going to be so useful for all our listeners. She shares some incredible mindset tips around how she has overcome some pretty big challenges along the way, which I'm sure will be useful to everyone listening.
Yeah, I really think so. And it's also so fascinating to hear how an 8 and 1500 metre both races and trains, because in my mind, it's quite different to how, I guess, marathon, ultra-marathon runners race and train. But there are some similarities as well, which is also super fascinating.
Yes, it is. There are a few things I always think about that I want to ask a middle distance runner. It's such a short race. Like, how do you make sure you're focused and making such quick decisions whilst everything's going on? I mean, in the marathon, I kind of feel quite lucky that, you know, if you mess up a mile, you've got 25 left and it's fine. But you don't have that luxury in the 15, definitely not the 8.
I know, it's a completely different mindset, isn't it? I think I would absolutely panic doing a 1500 metre race, but you're right, you have so much time to make decisions in the longer races.
Yeah, it'll be so interesting to hear how she navigates all that. So without further ado, shall we get Adelle on the show?
Let's do it.
Adelle, thanks so much for joining us for 5 Miles Easy today. We're so excited to dive into your very long career and being marathon and ultra runners. I feel like the middle distance world is something completely different to us. So we're very excited to pick your brains on that. And of course, you've just come off an incredible race as well. So we'll get into that too. But the first question we ask all our guests is, what is your why for running?
That's a hard one, actually. I think it's probably something to do with challenging myself. I think just challenging yourself every day, that's what kind of keeps me doing the sport. And yeah, I think that's probably the reason. I think if you can keep learning, then there's always a reason to keep doing it and improving. Yeah, and I think just like with that, you are never really sure what's kind of next. And I quite like that. I think there's something exciting in, like, I guess, the prospect of something, special happening as well. So
yeah, I feel like that answer's quite different to ones we've had before. And I really like what you said, you're always learning, because I actually don't think anyone said that, but it's so true. You learn from every run, like the good ones and the bad ones, and the sessions, the races, and that is really motivating in that journey.
And yeah, as you say, nothing is guaranteed. That's the thing with elite sport. It's, you know, you can have the best training block and not hit your goal, or things can feel like they're not going great and then you have an incredible race. Like, nothing is ever guaranteed, and that is what makes it so exciting.
And special when it does pay off, definitely. I think it means a lot more when it does go your way, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
And you were born in the US?
Yes.
And you have both British and Jamaican parents, and you were raised both in Jamaica and then moved to the UK, is that right? So what did your childhood actually look like, and how did you get into running?
Yeah, so like you said, I was born in the US. I was only there for like a year or two. My parents met there. My dad's Jamaican and my mum's British. So we moved to Jamaica and I lived there until I was about 8 years old, went to school there. Yeah, I like to think that I had, like, you know, a really amazing childhood growing up in quite rural Jamaica in the parish of Manchester. So it's kind of in the hills, mountains of Jamaica. And I think that's probably where I first started running. And, like, you know, it's a country where athletics is the number one sport, so it's kind of inherent in you to run, and basically can just remember running for as long as I can remember.
When you growing up in Jamaica, you say it's, you know, athletics is so kind of intrinsically throughout the country and in the culture. How was that in school? Like, it's mainly sprinting, right?
Yeah.
So did everyone kind of want to be a sprinter growing up? What was that like in school?
I think that is definitely the culture, and that's something that I hope that I can change going forward. But yeah, I always just wanted to run. I think the distance kind of wasn't as much of a factor. I remember when I was really young, I wanted to be a 400 runner actually. So maybe it is kind of in me somewhere to want to be a sprinter. But yeah, just kind of did everything. And when I moved to the UK at school, we used to do every single distance, a bit across country, and just somewhere along the way found myself in the middle distances.
And you were clearly hugely talented from a young age. Was there a moment where you thought, you know, I could actually make this my career? How did you kind of find that real love for the sport?
For as long as I can remember, I remember wanting to be an athlete. I remember watching the 2000 Sydney Olympics. I must have been about 8 years old, and watching it and being like, that's what I want to do. I want to be an athlete. I want that to be my job. But I genuinely would never have thought that I'd actually, do that. Yeah, it's crazy to think that you can be that young and have this big idea, but I think it's a lot easier to, think that big when you're a lot younger, but no way did I think would actually be an athlete.
When was the turning point when you realised, like, actually I could do this?
I think probably when I was 16, I made my first team for Great Britain, and I remember from that moment I was like, okay, I won a medal at the European Youth Olympics, and it was my first championship. So going into that, I kind of had no limits on myself. I was like, just go and see what happens. And it's kind of the approach that I try and channel now. But yeah, I think that just kind of, once you get there and you have a medal in your hand and you're standing on the podium, you're like, gosh, it feels so much more achievable. So yeah, I kind of always thought that I might be able to take it to that next level. But yeah, still then I wouldn't have said that I would have, been doing it for this long. Put it that way.
It's so cool at such a young age as well, 16, to win a medal and have your first GV vest. How did it feel to run internationally at such a young age? And did you feel pressure competing? You know, you're not an adult yet. Did that feel like a lot of pressure?
No, it's a funny thing. Like I think the bigger the occasion, the more I kind of thrive. I really love being in that kind of high pressure environment, enjoy everything that comes with, I guess, racing at championships. And yeah, I think I just kind of fell into it. I had no idea what a qualifying time was. I just happened to run quick enough, got selected, and I was like, this is amazing. I get to go away with all these amazing people and have a really fun time. And yeah, I just kind of just took one day at a time. And it's so funny. I'm always, trying to channel that kind of mindset, because I think there's so much in just simplicity and just being in the moment and going and just seeing what you can do on any given day. And that's definitely the approach I took at those championships. So yeah, I genuinely didn't really feel the pressure. I think I was just kind of like, if I don't get to do this again, I'm going to make the most of it and just live it out.
That's such a good mindset. I'm interested, it sounds so simple, and you're really just there for the joy of it and the joy of running. And I think sometimes, a lot of the time sports can be taken so seriously.
Yeah.
And we've said a couple of times, it's kind of ridiculous. We get paid to get from A to B as quickly as possible. When you break it down, it's like, it's not a serious thing, but it can feel so serious. And I think your mindset of kind of keeping it so simple and keeping hold of that childhood joy is incredible. Do you still manage to do that now? I know you said you kind of try to channel it, but having had years and years of experience and, being an adult now and having external pressure of sponsors and coaches and teams, how do you hang on to that?
Yeah, I think not all the time. I'm no, I know that that's a space where I produce my best race when I'm kind of focusing in that way, and that's probably taken quite a few years of working with the sports psych to identify that as well. But yeah, I think the way I bring it back is I just try and find humour in everything. There's silly things that happen on race day, like can't put your pins on your bib properly because your hands are shaking, or I've forgotten to take my caffeine, and you might just silly little things like that. And I think try and find humour in it. I also just always take a deep breath and have a smile on the start line. I think that's really helpful, just centering myself and just remembering that I'm actually doing it because I really enjoy it. Yeah, I think that's it, just identifying the joy and in kind of competing and being able to see what my body can do is like a massive thing for me. You know, there's definitely been days where I haven't focused as much in that way, and maybe things haven't gone to plan, and I've been a little bit more cognitive in the way that I've raced. I think I'm at a point now where I know that works really well for me, but yeah, it's definitely taken years.
I think that's so interesting. And I think everyone races their best when they're happy and relaxed and enjoying it. There aren't that many people who race really well when they're incredibly nervous and let those nerves get to them. But it's hard to identify that and also hard to control it. But yeah, it sounds like you're really nailing it. Going back to Youth Olympics, how did you get from there to, I guess, here in a brief summary of your career?
Definitely a lot of ups and downs, as I'm sure you both know. Yeah, sport is just never linear, and I think that's the biggest thing, is trying to kind of stay motivated in those periods where things are not ideal. I actually had, I think, 6 years where I didn't make another team. I'd represented England in that space of time, but I think from 16, I think I was like 21, 22, I made the under-23 championships. And I remember in that window of time just being like, am I going to get back to that? So that was really tough.
In that time, what kind of kept you going? Was it just the pure joy you had for the sport?
Honestly think at that point, I wasn't taking it, say, as seriously as I do now. And I didn't know that much. I think a lot of it was like ignorance is bliss. You know, I was still putting my energy into other things, creative, and actually like doing lots of things that I would do now. Say if I got injured, I'd be like, right, I'm going to put my attention here because it's not helpful for me to be so in it. I was just doing naturally because I was at university, I was studying art, so I wasn't really as focused on performance and the end result. And I think that's what helped me get back to performing.
Amazing. And then, I mean, fast forward, you obviously made the 2024 Olympics in Paris, which is incredible. But your journey there for the Olympics, I guess it started in 2012, where you were selected to be a torchbearer by Dame Kelly Holmes, which just seems like the most incredible opportunity for you. Were you 18, 19 years old then?
Yeah.
I mean, how cool is that? Did that experience kind of make you feel like you really wanted to be at the Olympics competing yourself one day?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such an incredible opportunity. And, you know, I'm forever thankful to Kelly for, you know, giving me that opportunity. And still, it's so surreal. Like, even I don't think I've watched it back that many times, but when I do, I'm just like, whoa, this is, you know, a massive thing. And how lucky am I to be a part of that? I'd say like that was in that window of those years where I was like, I'm not really sure if I'm going to get back to that. I think for me, like that kind of gave me a real sense of belief, you know, having someone like Dame Kelly Holmes, who I've like idolized since I was a kid, you know, not only seeing her as a mixed woman competing in the events that I compete in, but also, you know, just for her incredible performances. I think that really gave me, you know, the belief that I could maybe get there. You know, I thought if she sees something in me that I maybe don't see right now, then, you know, maybe I can get there one day.
So in Paris, when you then did make the team, you were representing Jamaica after switching allegiance. So previously you were representing GB. Why did you do that? And I guess what did it mean to you to represent Jamaica?
Yeah, so it's kind of been like a really long thought process, in the sense that I think when you're someone of dual heritage and dual nationality, I've always kind of seen it as much of a, I guess, honour to represent Great Britain as it is to represent Jamaica. But having grown up in Jamaica and the culture of athletics there, it's just always something that I wanted to experience. And I remember my mum saying to me, I think when I got my first vest when I was 16, you know, are you sure you want to do that? Because it might, you know, you might not be able to represent Jamaica, because she always knew that I wanted to do that as well. I actually never had the opportunity to do it previously. So I guess one blessing in disguise that came out of COVID for me was that having had an injury in 2019, my eligibility opened up having that year out of COVID, and then I missed out on the Olympic team in 2021. So for the first time, I was actually eligible to make that change. And
sorry, what do you mean by that in terms of how do you become eligible to do that?
So basically, if you want to change allegiance, World Athletics stipulate that you need to spend 3 years out of the sport competing at an international level. So I think I turned down a team champs and, you know, not kind of put myself in the mix for, you know, cross-country races and stuff. So it wasn't like I'd missed loads because COVID kind of brought that opportunity. But it's quite a long period of time. So You know, I maybe had some England vests in the years where things hadn't gone to plan, like I said, from, I guess, 16 to 21. And I never realised until I looked into it that actually I'd never had the opportunity to do that previously. Yeah, I think for me it was like definitely a decision that was kind of tied to identity as well. You know, being a black woman of mixed heritage in the middle distance events, it's not something that I don't always see myself reflected in the sport in the same way. And I think there was something deeply meaningful going essentially home and representing Jamaica. My dad had previously represented Jamaica, and it was something that I thought would be a real honour to do for, I guess, the Tracey name.
How did it feel putting on the Jamaican vest for the first time? Was it emotional?
Yeah, it was really emotional. And I think as well, being part of a team where, you know, the team managers, you know, had known my dad as an athlete, and just experiencing that from the years where I'd had like a few issues as well. Like, you know, it always means so much more when you get back to a place where things are really positive. So coupling that with the opportunity to run for Jamaica was, a big deal for me.
That's so special. And does it feel really different as well? I guess being able to experience how two different governing bodies are run, is it a completely different environment to be in?
Yeah, I'd say like in terms of being on two different teams, they operate differently. I'd say mentality is very, very different, but that might be cultural as well. But I think, just being able to be with teammates and incredible athletes and share that experience with them is like the kind of cherry on top for me.
And you've just come back from Jamaican National Championships where you absolutely smashed it. 1500 metre champion and season's best in the 800 metres as well. What was that experience like? What were the Jamaican National Championships like?
Yeah, do you know, it's really special always going to the Jamaican National Stadium. They've done the track in like the national colours, so it's all like
so cool.
Yeah, black, gold and green now, so that's super special. I think, like I said before, I think it's definitely meaningful for me to do that in front of, you know, a Jamaican crowd and show that, you know, Caribbean women can also go far. We're not just fast. I hope that will make a lot of impact in the years to come with the depth and the distance events, because I think it's important to see these things. And, you know, you what do they say, you can't be what you can't see. So, you know, Natoya Gould-Toppin, my teammate who I'm great friends with as well, she's been absolutely killing it in the 800 for years, and she's, you know, run 155 in the 800. But I think the 1500 and up, there's definitely work to be done.
It's so funny because as you're saying that, I'm just thinking like 800 metres is a sprint. Like that is fast, not far. But it is just, it's so different coming from the other end of the spectrum. I can just imagine the Jamaican National Championships. I'm just imagining it being the most fun environment and very different to a British one. Is that right?
Potentially, yeah. I think the energy is high. Like, again, like I say, it's the number one sport in Jamaica. So if you're coming to the stadium to watch, you'll, you know, bring in the energy. You know, they get their pots and pans out, the vuvuzelas. Like, there's
so
a great amount of energy, which is really cool.
I think we need that in the British champs. That'd be great.
We do lack a bit of energy sometimes, don't we?
Too polite and British.
But I think you're so right, because, you know, you see the Jamaican sprinters being, you know, like they're so cool. They're like superstars of the sport. And actually, if everyone's flocking to watch the Jamaican sprinters, then why can't it be the same for the middle distance athletes? So I think that's such an exciting time for you to be part of it and paving the way for middle distance.
So that was obviously an incredible high for you, that moment. But as you touched on before, there have been plenty of lows along the way. How do you manage such extremes? I came from a corporate career where, in comparison, you know, of course you have highs and lows in it, but it's a lot less extreme. A bad day in the office, you get to go home and cut off from it all and have a nice weekend and forget about it all. Whereas I think one of the things I've really noticed transitioning into elite sport is like the highs are really high, but the lows are really low, and it's very difficult to cut off from anything. So I'm interested how you've managed that over such a long career.
I definitely think just having a really strong team around you is a big part of it. I think if you've got people that can ground you and really give you, like, you know, positive feedback, but I think it's just reminding you of what's important. I think just when you strip it all back, when it comes down to it, it's just a race. It's just one run. And I think I bring it back to that a lot, because I think the sport is sometimes not great at facilitating that mindset. you know. So I think, yeah, it's just important about being realistic about it. The good thing about my event is that I always have another opportunity to go out and race, and I know that must be very like different for you guys because the recovery is a lot different. But I find the best way to kind of, I guess, deal with a disappointing race or whatever is to just throw myself, you know, into a new situation, practice those skills, and yeah, just, you know, the only way is up when you've had a situation like that. When it comes to injuries, I think that's very different. To my detriment, sometimes I won't give up. So I think when you have an injury, that's not always the best mindset to have. Last year, I tore my plantar in May, right before my season opener. At the time, it wasn't diagnosed, so I didn't actually know the extent of the injury, and we sort of put it down to plantar fasciitis. I did actually have a scan and it wasn't picked up. So for 3 months, I ran on this torn plantar going into the Olympic Games. A lot of cross training, a lot of pain, a lot of I won't give up. When actually, you know, I'm glad that I didn't know the extent of it because I was very lucky to get away with 4 rounds at the Olympic Games. But there is a part of me that's like, I don't know if I would have given myself grace to be like, yeah, we need to just stop. I think I needed to have like somebody tell me on an MRI that this is not okay. And we definitely would have made that call. But I think it's like that yin and yang of never giving up, which gets you through those difficult periods of time, but also being able to say, okay, we just need to like let it go right now.
Yeah, it is so hard though, because yes, maybe that's a sensible decision, but it's your life as well. You know, running is your life. And I know you say, you know, you have to remind yourself it's just a race, which it is, but it takes up so much time and it's so important to you that it is really hard to make those decisions.
Oh yeah, 100%. And your identity is wrapped up in that as well. So it's so easy to just say that you can do that, but when you're actually in the moment, it feels like so much more intense. I definitely know that from last year.
Rose, how important is sleep and recovery to you?
Honestly, Steph, it's everything. You can train as hard as you like, but recovery is when you actually make the gains from that training. I've really tried to dial in my recovery, and sleep is the foundation of all of that.
Totally agree. That's why I've been using Pillar Performance Triple Magnesium.
It's so good, isn't it? I've been using it too, and I've had the best sleep ever.
I actually look forward to it in the evening.
Delicious little tea before I go to bed.
And then when I check my Aura scores in the morning, my sleep quality is so good and my HRV is nice and high.
Well, funny you should say that. Pillar Performance's triple magnesium was actually developed by a top HRV researcher. And there's a ton of scientific evidence which shows that this type of magnesium activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is why we're able to fall asleep quicker and stay in those critical deep and REM sleep cycles for longer.
And our listeners can experience the same benefits by heading to pillarperformance.shop, or if you're in North America, visiting thefeed.com and use the code 5mileseasy for 15% off your first purchase.
That's right, 15% off sleeping better, recovering faster, and running stronger with Pillar Performance. Thanks to Pillar Performance for supporting this podcast and keeping us injury-free. What about in between heats? Because I always think it must be so difficult if the heat hasn't gone to plan and then you've got to come back so quickly. You don't have the time to kind of pick yourself up and like process it all and then get back on the start line. You're back on the start line the next day. So how do you manage that and make sure you're in the right mindset for your next heat or the final?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think generally if a heat hasn't gone quite right but you've qualified, I think the focus is on, okay, I'm through, what can I do better? And usually you've already made those adjustments in your mind before you go into that situation. I think you guys probably know yourself, like you're so quick to notice the things you could have done better, but the things that we're doing well, we don't always think about as much. So yeah, like from the minute I step off the track, I already know what I want to do next time. I think it's a case of just like quieting those thoughts and trying to wind down and just get into a state where you can just switch off and relax is the hardest thing, I think, because I usually have quite a lot of caffeine and you've got all the adrenaline. It's tough to wind down from that experience to then
how do
go
you
in the
do
next
that
day. I usually find like just those kind of things that you do, like ice baths, and I'll just do like little bits of self-care, like a face mask. It sounds so like silly, but it does help. Just I usually try not to like actually watch any of the athletics, which I think is a real shame because like I never actually see any of the champs if I'm at one, because I kind of don't want to mentally get too into it. So yeah, I think just those little things help you just switch off, and I think switching off is the biggest thing rather than mentally getting ready for it, because I mean, I run on a racetrack most days. When you get in that environment, you're ready to go. That's less of the issue, being ready. It's more switching off.
So do you think it's, so if you're racing back-to-back days, do you think it's more the mental recovery over the physical to get back on the start line again?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you're fit and healthy, it's definitely the mental side of things rather than the physical.
Yeah, that's so different, because I can't imagine finishing a race and then being like, okay, we go again tomorrow. Like, just be so tired. But I guess it's just a different stress on your body.
Yeah,
racing.
You guys run so far. That's why. I'm sure.
Yeah. I was thinking about it after my last, because I like never sleep. I can't sleep after a marathon like for 3 nights.
Really?
I really struggle to sleep. I'm just like, how does anyone do it? Who has to go again? But some of that will be the actual stress, the physical stress on my body, but it is also the adrenaline and the mental stress that you go through. So
yeah, and you think you're doing that for so much longer than I would be. I'm literally like 4 minutes.
So do you find, can you sleep after a race then?
Sometimes. I think it's funny. I think when it comes to championship, because you have to go again, it's like you make that real conscious effort to like try and completely switch off. If I'm just doing one race and I know it, I'm not racing again, I probably won't sleep that well. But I think it's also knowing that I've got time to recover. And
No, it's so interesting. What about the whole process? Because this is something that's so different as well to the races we do, is you go into a call room before you step out onto the track. You've done your warm up, you go in there, and then you run out and do this performance, some strides on the track, do your race. What's kind of going through your mind from the beginning of that process during your warm up, sitting there in the call room, which must be very nerve wracking, and then getting out there on the race? How do you stay focused, and what are you thinking about?
what am I thinking about? I don't know if there's a lot going on up there half the time. I think it's just distracting yourself until you get to the call room. And then the call room, I think once I'm in the call room, it's very much being in the moment. I think the day and the build up, because quite often we race in the evening, so you've got the whole day. So, you know, I'm just distracting myself, watching a bit of Netflix, just like sleeping, like trying to kill as much of the day as possible. And then when I actually warm up, I'm like, okay, now I can move. I can shake it out and kind of get in the zone, get some good tunes on. But yeah, when you get to call room, it's kind of that strange situation where it's so quiet. Everyone's there, but like you just have to be in the moment. I feel like you can't think too far ahead. And that kind of gets me ready for the race too, because I know I run my best when I'm running kind of more intuitively, and you can only really do that by being present, I guess. So easier said than done, but yeah, it's always a strange one. I kind of, again, bring humour to it, because I'm like, this is so hilarious. We're all just sat here so awkwardly. Like, it's so random that we have to do this.
There must be so much weird nervous energy going on. Like people some must be chatty, some must like not want to talk to anyone.
Yeah, I think everyone has like a different way of doing it, but I'm just kind of like accept it for what it is.
Get in the zone. And what about in the actual race? Because this is another thing I always think about. In a marathon, you kind of, the first mile, anything can happen. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect because you've got 25 to go. Whereas 800 meters, 1500 meters, you've got to be on it from the gun. And there isn't a lot of margin for error. So what do you think about in the race, and how do you make those tactical decisions? Do you have a plan going into it, or is it more reactive than that, depending on what other people do?
I usually race my best race when I'm just sort of focused on myself and what I can kind of do. It's a tough one because the middle distances are so exciting because you never know what's going to happen, but also that means you can't plan it. So you're literally just reacting and running as intuitively as possible. I think when I've thought about doing something before I've done it, that's usually when I'm more frustrated when I finish. So I usually go into the race with a mindset of, okay, as long as I feel like I've left everything out there today, then I'll finish the race feeling satisfied, because there's nothing worse than being like, oh, I should have made that move. There's a lot of moving around, negotiating. And yeah, I think when it comes down to it, I usually for the 1500 would break down the race into sections. I know it's not that long, but it's longer than 800. So I usually get to 800 and be like, okay, right, we need to like move things along, get into a good position. At a K, I'd probably start trying to wind it up depending on the right race situation. And then it's kind of just anything you have left. 800, like you said, is very different in that I feel like now I've been running more 1500s. I'm usually running a better race when I kind of run a little bit more evenly, but then you've got athletes that will go through the bell in like 55, 56 seconds. So it's just about spreading my energy and trying to run my best race and just focusing on myself, really. So yeah, every race is different. I feel like definitely with the 1500, I've found there's way more different ways of running it. The 800 is either kind of a gun to tape or a bit of a tactical one. So yeah.
Do you practice all different scenarios in training? Do you practice like a slow race and then a really fast last sprint compared to, I guess, more of an even pace race?
Yeah. My coach will get me to do change of pace situations. So I'm really lucky that my partner is my training partner. So he sort of will dictate the pace and my coach will tell him what to do. And it's just a case of reacting to that pace. So, you know, it might be a 300 rep, but he'll go from 150 or he'll wind it up. So it's just about getting the body used to surging at different points and just being ready for a tactical race, basically.
Do you ever actually run 800 at 800 race pace in training?
I have once, yeah. We did a time trial, I think it was in 2023 at St. Mary's, just because we couldn't get a race when we wanted one. And a lot of the guys in my group are we've got like a good group of like sort of sub 2 athletes. So we basically set up a race and Craig had us like all in the cool room before. It was really fun. Cool. So yeah, sometimes we'll do that, but usually it's like a 600 time trial. Yeah, not the full distance.
What does your training actually look like? Because again, that's going to be very different. What do you do in a normal week? How many sessions days do you have? How many easy days do you have? Just so interested to hear it structured.
So it's very different in the winter to how it looks now in the summer.
Okay.
In the winter, my mileage can be anywhere between, I guess, 60 to 70 miles a week. 70 is probably the most I've done. And that'll be made up of Tuesday, which is kind of more of a track day. I do gym in the afternoon and sometimes a shakeout in the evening. Monday is just like a steady day, so like 6 miles. Wednesday, again, steady day. We just run once. And then Thursday is usually some threshold in the morning and maybe some speed in the afternoon or just an easy run in the afternoon. I have every Friday, most Fridays, as a rest day. And then Saturday, again, is more of an interval session. So Tuesday and Saturday are like my two key sessions, and then Thursday is like threshold. One is more of an 8 session, one is more of a 15 session, and then Sunday is long run, which I usually wouldn't go further than 12 miles. I'm sure that will change in the future because 12 is definitely the furthest I've gone, but we've been building that up over the years. But I would say like I've definitely cross-trained a lot more this year off the back of last year. I did loads of cross-training last year because I had to, but we've actually found that it's a really great way of getting extra miles in. And yeah, this time of year I'd say like I'm probably around like 50 miles a week, but I'm running a lot more quality sessions, so they'll be more at 8 and 15 pace rather than trying to get the volume in.
I'm actually quite surprised how much you run.
Okay,
like why do you need to run 70 miles a week? Because obviously that's,
I ask myself this
if it's
time.
Like relative,
yeah,
that would be like me running 300 miles a week or something. You know, it's great. It's so much more than you have to.
I was thinking a 12 mile long run also is like compared to your race distance is actually a really long run. Okay. So I was quite
I wasn't sure if you guys were like
no. I was like, wow,
really
that's surprised.
A lot. What's the benefit of doing that?
So I think for the 1500, the mindset is that you kind of train a little bit more like a 5K runner, and for the 8, training a little bit more like a 15 runner to just have that. I guess over the years where I've accumulated more running, like I've got that capacity to do a little bit more, but also getting through the rounds in a championship, you kind of need to have that endurance to be able to be as strong through the rounds and recover well. So I think that's a big part of just getting that base mileage done in the winter.
Interesting. Yeah, because in marathon we do, I go up to a bit over 100 miles a week, which relatively is not that much more, but the purpose is to then do sessions on tired legs because you're going to have to run on tired legs in a marathon. And so I was thinking, for how does that fit into 8 and 15? But you actually do have to run on tired legs because of the heats and going through the championship. And of course, I guess the whole summer you're racing a lot. Yeah. So do you feel like sometimes you do have to race on not so fresh legs? Is that?
Yeah, definitely. And there's windows of time where we'll be training quite hard in between the races because we're trying to peak a little bit later and not wanting to go into the races too fresh because we've got to be ready for another time sort of thing. So definitely the last couple of weeks, June, May, that racing was done on some very tired legs because the goal is hopefully to be ready in September.
How would you then, say you raced on the weekend, would you then do like your Tuesday, Thursday session before the following weekend if you were racing again, or how would that work?
So say I raced on the Saturday.
Yeah.
I would still do a Sunday long run, maybe not as far, maybe like 8 to 10 miles.
Yeah.
And then I would probably session on the Tuesday, but kind of shut it down the second half of the week. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can't get as much done when you're racing regularly. So we tend to go through like blocks of racing. So we'll say, okay, we're going to do 4 or 5 races and that's the focus.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back to a block.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's so interesting to hear how it all works. It is just such a different world, but equally maybe not as different as I thought it was going to be. You've had such an incredibly long career, from running competitively since you were 16. Do you have a highlight moment, or are there too many to choose from?
I would definitely say the 2023 championships in Budapest, World Championships, is a highlight for me. I think that everything kind of came together that week for me. I think I ended up racing 5 races in the space of 10 days, and I ran a national record in the 1500 and went sub 4 for the first time, and made the final of the 800 meters, which was like a massive goal for me. Like I'd always wanted to, make a final on the world stage, and to do it over 800 meters that I've been, running 800 since I was 16. Obviously 1500, that's kind of a newer thing for me, but I didn't make the final of the 1500, but I think it was one of the quickest semi-finals ever run at that point. And yeah, I was just so proud of the fact that I had gone into each situation just with an open mind. And yeah, I think that's probably my moment that I would be proud of.
Oh, that's awesome. You've spoken a bit about how you try to keep a very open mind as to what's possible and not limit yourself. But do you have any major career goals? Like what do you think is possible, and what would you like to achieve?
I think for me, I never say never, but I would like to run a good 5K. I think I feel like I've got that capacity now. I'm kind of, the way that my training shifted the last couple of years, I'd be excited to try and go and run a 5K just to see what I could do. And I think it's just like not putting a limit on that range. I think so many times people have been like, are you running the 8 or the 15? I'm like, just both. Like, I think, if we're feeling good and fit, then just go and see what happens, really. So that's, definitely I would say, like, not to limit myself on the distance as well as what I feel I can do in that.
Would that be on the road or the track that you want to do the 5K?
I think it would be more enjoyable on the road, but it would be,
I agree.
I think, it would be good to do a track just to get an idea of what I can actually do as well. I think would be nice.
And I feel like with all this talk about 1500 metres, we can't not mention the attempt on the mile, the sub 4 minute mile. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, because hearing your 1500 metre time, in my head, I'm like, you're so close to it. It seems so close. But then watching Faith's attempt to, she ran 4:06. So she was obviously still a way off. I think it just highlights how difficult it is to do it.
Yeah. And,
she is really stretching the limits of what is possible for humanity. But I'm interested to hear your take on it as a 1500 metre runner who is a lot closer to the reality of the whole thing.
Yeah, I think it's the way that technology is developing, the way that athletes can now recover. I mean, Faith's shown she's pushed boundaries, and I think 1500 metre women's running it wouldn't be where it is if it wasn't for Faith. Seeing her perform in the way that she has shows that it's possible. I genuinely feel like she will do it. It will happen. It'll be a bit like the Roger Bannister, where one person does it and then a lot of people do it. I know 6 seconds feels like a lot right now, but I just think, why not?
Yeah, why not? And it does just bring that excitement to the sport. Because I think, as we were saying earlier, you get the excitement around the sprinters, and I guess somewhat around the marathon as well with Kipchoge, but there's that sort of middle ground where Ingebrigtsen's bringing it, but just having that excitement around the women's sport as well is so exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is quite relatable. Like a mile time, even a 5K time, I think is so much more relatable than the 1500. It's so confusing for people that aren't necessarily naturally drawn to the sport to understand. So I think having something like that, even trying to challenge to break that, I think is really good for the sport.
How much do you think is mental versus physical in racing? And I'm thinking that because with Roger Bannister's 4 minute mile, it's so interesting how once he did it, lots of other people did it. And it's not like there was suddenly an improvement in human capability overnight. But that must have been a bit of a mental thing. It's like, oh, well, he can do it, so I can do it. But in your racing, how much do you think is mental?
I think a lot. Like, I'd even go as far to say as like maybe 50%, because there's just been times where, yeah, like physically I maybe haven't been 100%, but mentally I've been in a really good place and I've been able to just go way beyond what I thought I was previously capable of. So I think if that's true to me, then you've got to take, you know, someone like, Faith or, Kipchoge, they take that so much further with the physicality that they bring as well. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, it'll be so exciting to see what happens in the next 10 years and if everyone is suddenly breaking for the mile as soon as she does. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that's so applicable to every distance as well, because I can totally relate. I feel like there's somewhere I've definitely not been in the best physical shape, but I've just been so relaxed and happy and had a great race, and it takes you by surprise.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it is definitely applicable over all the distances in that way. Do you feel, you mentioned earlier you've worked a lot with a sports psychologist. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that's really brought you on and kind of kept you strong in the sport over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. I was really fortunate to be approached by, I think, maybe in 2015 by Mike Cunningham. He's amazing, and I never really entertained the idea of sports psychology, I guess, because I don't know, it didn't really factor into my radar at that point. And yeah, we've been working together for 10 years and he's just been so great at reviewing races and just getting me to see the useful information in every situation, particularly last year where I had this injury going into a championship. I was able to kind of just focus on the things that I could control, and I really felt like I got the best out of my performance in that situation despite everything that was going on. And I think that was down to how I was kind of approaching it and thinking about it.
That's so interesting. And I love that point about just getting what you can out of it. And I think that's applicable to everything we do in sport. You always say, Steph, that your goal is just to do your best on the day with what you've got. And ultimately, that's all we can do. But it's so easy to think, okay, well, I've got to hit these specific targets. I've got these time targets. I've got these placing targets. Which there's so much that's out of our control that goes into that. Yeah. So I think that's such a powerful way of thinking, to actually get the best from yourself.
If you could go back to your 16-year-old self at the European Youth Olympics, what would you say to young Adelle on that start line, wearing the GB vest, knowing where you are today?
I would probably say trust yourself. I think a lot of the time the confidence that we get out of a situation comes after the fact, and I think it's easy to forget that comes the first bit where you actually aren't sure if you can do it or not just comes from just trusting yourself and just going with it. Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
That's such a good tip. Just trust yourself.
Yeah, I mean, what more can you do, to be honest? I think it's so hard what we do, and just being able to think, I know what to do in this situation. I've been here before. And if you haven't been there before, just trusting that you'll know what to do, I think is the best that you can do, really.
Yeah, totally agree. And linked to that, I guess you're going to learn something from it. Whatever happens, the outcome will be the outcome, and there will be positives you can take away from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So our final question that we ask all our guests, and we may have slightly touched on this because we asked what your career highlight was, but if you have one moment, maybe another moment, that you give yourself a big high five for, can be in your running career or can be anywhere else in life, what would it be?
I think I'd probably say for Paris last year. That took a hell of a lot of energy and just I guess hardship as well, in terms of going through the injury. And, I can call myself an Olympian, which I'm super proud of. And, I think in 2016, I had the qualifying time. 2021, I had the qualifying time. So it took me 12 years to get there, but it definitely was an incredible experience. And I felt like I appreciated it for what it was. I definitely would have loved to be healthy for it, but, being in that stadium, seeing the crowds, experiencing everything that comes with being at Olympics and being in a village, I really made the most of that. And yeah, I think I'd give myself a high five for that. Yeah.
Amazing. Definitely very well deserved. And especially after 12 years of perseverance to get there, it makes it all the more incredible.
And then you've got the World Champs, I guess, coming up this year. So that'll be a big one as well.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I think I've got to wait until selection, which I think is second week of August.
Okay.
But yeah, fingers crossed that will go smoothly. And yeah, we'll be in Japan in September.
Amazing. Can't
Very
wait.
exciting. We can't wait to watch. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing all of your amazing tips and tricks and so much about your mindset. I think it's really fascinating, and you shared some amazing insights that people can use in all aspects of sport. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us for 5 Miles Easy.
See you next time.